Welcome to the LISD Debate Finals. This year in the finals, we have Hudson High School versus Blissfield High School. Our debaters this year, we have David Calvo. He is a sophomore at Hudson High School and a first-year varsity debate student. He enjoys science in general, but chemistry in particular. He plans to go into the Air Force to study and train to become an astronaut. Thank you. Also from Hudson, we have Carson Price, who is a junior. He is an all-state wrestler and plans to attend Johns Hopkins. Allison Weber is a senior at Blissfield High School. She enjoys playing soccer. Allison plans on studying international relations and law at Michigan State University. Max Freeland is a junior at Blissfield High School. He likes to watch classic movies and hopes to go into a profession that allows him time to travel. Thank you, debaters, and good luck.
Judge ready? Judges ready? Timekeeper? Negative team. Yep. Science is more than a school subject or the periodic table or the properties of waves. It is an approach to the world, a critical way to understand and explore and engage with the world, and then have the capacity to change that world. Barack Obama, March 23, 2015. According to the U.S. Department of Education, it is becoming more important than ever to equip our youth with the knowledge and skills to solve increasingly complex issues. To do this, we must dedicate more resources to the fields collectively known as STEM. Therefore, we are resolved that the United States federal government should substantially increase its funding and/or regulation of STEM education programs in elementary and secondary schools in the United States. Harms 1. If we do not increase funding of STEM, the United States' international performance deficit will only increase. According to Robert Rothman, Senior Fellow Alliance at Excellent Education, 2013, the results of the third International Mathematics and Science Study, released in 1996, attracted a great deal of headlines and attention with its finding that U.S. students performed well below the level of the peers from other countries. Although fourth graders performed relatively well in science, the fourth graders were among the best in the world. Eighth graders performed just below the international average in mathematics, and 12th graders were at the bottom of the international rankings, outperforming only students from Cyprus and South Africa. On to the harms 2. Students who do not attend college are not adequately prepared to enter the workforce. According to Richard Lakes, professor of education at Georgia State University, 2015, an influential report written by 3 members of the Harvard Graduate School of Education entitled Pathways to Prosperity, Meeting the Challenge of Preparing Young Americans for the 21st Century, indicated that non-college-bound students need access to training for middle-scale jobs. Authors Simmons, Schwartz, and Ferguson claimed lessons from Europe strongly suggest that well-developed, high-quality, and vocational education programs provide excellent pathways for many young people to enter the adult workforce. Harms 3. Inadequate attention to STEM education is significantly harmful. According to Nancy Defoe, 2016, according to the Office of Innovation and Improvement, the STEM team at the U.S. Department of Education, STEM is the answer to an ever-changing, increasingly complex world. It is more important than ever to our nation's youth that our nation's youth are prepared to bring knowledge and skills to solve problems, make sense of information, and know how to gather and evaluate evidence to make decisions. These are the kinds of skills that students develop in science, technology, engineering, and math, disciplines collectively known as STEM. On to the harms 4. Cyber attacks are increasingly likely and devastating. New defenses are key to preventing conflicts. According to Paul Rosenberg, professor of law at George Washington University, Cyber Warfare, How Conflicts in Cyberspace Are Challenging America and the World, 2013, the Department of Homeland Security has identified 18 sectors of the economy as the nation's critical infrastructure and key resources. As one would expect of a comprehensive list, it covers everything from transportation to the defense industrial base. It also includes energy, financial systems, water, agriculture, and telecommunications. The remarkable thing is that virtually all of the sectors now substantially depend on cyber systems. On to the inherency 1, education is not currently preparing students to fulfill future jobs in the STEM fields. The future of U.S. jobs are in STEM fields, but U.S. students are not adequately prepared to fill these jobs. According to Tamara Moore, professor of engineering education at Purdue University, 2016, this call to action is anchored by two distinct realities. The jobs of the future are integrally STEM-driven, and the foundation of STEM knowledge students receive in K-12 has been directly linked to the prosperity of our country. Specifically, 1 of every 3 jobs by 2015 will be STEM-related. Further, over 80% of the fastest-growing occupations in our country are dependent on mastery of mathematics, engineering, technology, and science knowledge and skills, and these positions are being filled by talent abroad due to the talent shortage within the U.S. Inherency 2, Trump's current education budget plans to further devastate STEM education. According to Education Week, November 16, 2016, from Nexus, Donald Trump's victory in the race for the White House leaves widespread uncertainty about what's in store for public schools under the first Republican administration in 8 years. Aside from school choice, Trump, a New York-based real estate developer who has never before held public office, spent little time talking about K-12 education during his campaign, and he has no record to speak of in the issue for insights into what he may propose. We're all engaging in a lot of speculation because there hasn't been a lot of serious discussion about this, especially in the Trump campaign. Martin R.S., an associate professor of education at Harvard University, said in the run-up to the November 8th presidential election. For the Inherency 3, economic indicators show a coming shortage of STEM workers. According to Jonathan Rothwell, a contributor at U.S. News, September 15, 2014, for one thing, wages have grown relatively fast in most STEM-oriented occupations, which is a clear indication of a shortage. From 2000 to 2013, analyzing Bureau of Labor statistics data and adjusting for inflation, median salaries and workers in computer and mathematical, healthcare practitioner, engineering, and science occupations rose 8%, 7%, 6%, and 5% respectively, even as those for the average U.S. worker showed no growth. Software developers, for instance, saw salaries soar 26% over the same period, culminating in an average of $82,000 in 2013, up from $48,000 in 1980. More broadly, an analysis I completed early this summer for the Brookings Institution of Census data showed a large relative increase in STEM earnings premium, about 60% from 1980 to 2012, controlling for education, experience, and gender. For Inherency 4, students' lack of STEM exposure prevents them from developing an interest in related fields. According to Elaine Hom, science contributor, February 11, 2014, though the United States has historically been a leader in these fields, fewer students have been focusing on these topics recently. According to the U.S. Department of Education, only 16% of high school students are interested in STEM career and have proven a proficiency in mathematics. Currently, near 28% of high school freshmen declare an interest in STEM-related field, the department website says, but 57% of these students will lose interest by the time they graduate from high school. On to the solvency. An implementation of the federal STEM education 5-year strategic plan will increase academic achievement in STEM fields. According to Susan Singer, Division Director of U.S. Education and Human Resources, the plan will improve science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education by implementing the federal STEM education 5-year strategic plan, CAP goal objectives aligned with the 5 priority areas, and 2 coordination objectives outlined in the strategic plan. On to my Solvency 2. An increase in STEM funding resolves the shortage of tech workers. According to Tom Risen, May 20, 2016, cybersecurity workers are in high demand but in short supply, and a panel of tech professionals on Thursday discussed how to get more students interested in that field and to prepare hiring managers to recognize qualified women and minority candidates. For Solvency 3, those tech workers fill vital cybersecurity roles and are a key to national security. So what we mean by those tech workers is for the Solvency 2, the tech workers that we talked about in that. According to Amanda Mason, Director of Strategic Programs Intel Community and Department of Defense, May 19, 2016, in our ever-connected world, cybersecurity takes on an increasingly critical role as cyber professionals who protect the digital and physical infrastructures that maintain the nation's power grids, water supplies, e-commerce, and business systems, hospitals, nuclear facilities, and more. For the sake of time, I'm just going to skip that evidence and go down to our plan. Our plan is to implement a federal 5-year plan. The funding is $4.3 billion set over a 5-year plan, redirected from prior Department of Education funding. Funds will be redirected from prior STEM and other programs that the plan is going to liquidate. An additional $8 billion will be redirected from prior defense funding. The enforcement is normal means. The mandates is adopt proposed plan, and the agency is the U.S. Department of Education. Thank you. I am now open for cross-examination.
So for your harms too, you said students who do not plan to attend college are not adequately prepared to enter the workforce, is that right?
Yeah, that was non-college bound students.
Okay, so how would you fix that harm?
What do you, well, we, oh, I don't understand the question.
Like, what kind of program would you put in place to ensure that people who don't plan to attend college are going to be prepared to enter the workforce?
Well, these programs would more adequately educate them before they graduate high school,
All right.
so that when they're not going to college, they still have that education.
Okay.
Okay, so in your harms for, you talk about how cyber attacks are increasingly likely and devastating, and that new defenses are key to preventing conflicts. But then in your plan, you talked about how you were going to take $8 billion away from defense funding. Was that correct?
Yeah, but that.
Okay, so the funding we're going to be taking away from the defense, that's going to be actually more valuable when it's put into the cybersecurity training instead of just building nuclear arsenals and things like that.
Okay, so where specifically in like where is the money that you're taking away from the defense fund originally allocated to?
Okay, so there's a discretionary budget for the defense funding. The discretionary budget for defense, or the non-discretionary budget for the defense is over $500 billion.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to be taking $8 billion out of that, so not a very significant number.
Okay. Do you have a number as to how much money is already being put towards STEM education in the U.S. right now?
I do not currently.
You do not.
Do you? Yeah, is that all? Or?
Would liquidating these programs that already address STEM education, would that be sort of, what additional funding is there that wouldn't be from those other departments?
Well, like we said, we're taking that defense funding and we're adding that to it when we're liquidating those funds.
Okay.
So that's more than just compiling it all.
And that was 8%?
That was $8 billion, I believe.
$8 billion, okay.
Okay, so it said that the $4.3 billion is set over a 5-year plan, and then you say that the $8 billion is going to be redirected. At what rate is the $8 billion going to be divvied out, or is it going to just kind of be like, okay. Can I have a minute and a half?
There's just one place where students are students first, and athletics are played with purpose and perspective. That place is your local high school. High school sports offer more than the joy of competition. Studies show that student athletes are also likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in other areas of their lives, including academics. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play or even what you wear. You just need to be there. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Judges, are you ready? Timekeeper, are you ready? Affirmative team, are you ready? All right, so the roadmap for you, Judge, I'm going to be attacking their harms for, solvency 2, inherency 4, to start with, and possibly some more if I have enough time. So their harms 4 states that cyber attacks are increasingly likely and devastating. New defenses are key to preventing conflicts. I have evidence here that says the U.S. cyber capabilities are already the best in the world. This is from Thomas Christensen. He's a professor of world politics at Princeton University, and he's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, the China Challenge Shaping the Choices of a Rising Power, 2015. In 2012, General Keith Alexander, the U.S. general in charge of Cyber Command, broke silence when various reports had suggested that somehow the U.S. was unilaterally vulnerable to foreign cyber attack. He said, "I can assure you that in appropriate circumstances and on order from the National Command Authority, we can back up the department's assertion that any actor threatening a crippling cyber attack against the United States would be taking a grave risk." In 2013, he went further, stating that the U.S. government believes U.S. cyber offensive capabilities are the best in the world. So what that's saying is that the U.S.'s cyber capabilities are already the best in the world, so it doesn't make sense to reallocate this $8 billion from a defense fund that could be going towards something else that could be improving our military and bolstering our military, and rerouting it to something that doesn't need bolstering because it's already at the level that it needs to be at in order to protect the U.S. I am going to move on to the attack on their Inherency 4. Their Inherency 4 states that students' current lack of STEM exposure prevents them from developing an interest in related fields. I have evidence here that says we already have too many graduates in STEM fields. So this is from David Berliner, professor of education at Arizona State University, 50 Myths and Lies That Threaten America's Public Schools from 2014. If there actually is a supply problem, it may be one of oversupply rather than undersupply. There is currently unemployment and underemployment for those with STEM degrees. Yes, unemployment rates for graduates with STEM degrees are lower than for those without STEM degrees, but the prevailing rhetoric is not about how some workers are less employable than other workers. It's about shortages in STEM fields and that harm our economy and thus the nation. The fact that there is already some unemployment among STEM degree holders suggests that increasing the supply of STEM graduates will not address unfulfilled needs. Instead, it will decrease or eliminate the current comparative advantage of STEM workers, increasing the likelihood of more unemployment for all STEM workers and simultaneously decreasing their current wage advantage. So what that is saying is that if they put all this money to kind of broadcast STEM to a larger audience and encourage these students to go into it, it's practically setting them up for failure because there's already an oversupply of STEM workers trying to get into the STEM field. So therefore, they would be spending all this money to put their plan in place, but in the end, it would really just be detrimental to the U.S. economy and productivity because you would just have a bunch of people with these degrees that they paid for that could not actually do anything with them because the job to employee ratio is so offset. Moving on to their Solvency II. Their Solvency II said an increase in STEM funding resolves the shortage of tech workers. And again, I say that there are already more graduates in STEM fields than there are jobs available. This is from Andrew Hacker, professor of political science at Queens College. The BLS estimates that in the decade ending in 2022, the U.S. will have created some 134,400 additional engineering positions. In 2013, the most recent year for figures at this writing, some 86,000 fledgling engineers graduated from American colleges and universities. At this rate, the decade will produce 860,000 new engineering graduates, but that number is over 6 times what the BLS is projecting for job openings. So what that's saying is that even if they're going to increase funding and it's going to solve for the shortage that is already there, but what we're saying is that there isn't actually a shortage that is there, which makes their plan not necessary, which means that the money that they're going to be taking from other places to put this plan into action could be more useful in other places because this plan does not need to be put into place. So I also would like to run an attack on their Harms 3, which states that inadequate attention to STEM education is significantly harmful. So we have evidence here that right here. So we have evidence here that the U.S. already has acts in place to kind of help bolster that STEM education and make sure that we still do have a focus on innovation. So this is, so we have 2, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which supports STEM spending, and then there is also the America Competes Act, which also supports STEM spending. So the ESSA, this is from Education Week, January 6, 2016, but ESSA offers many more possible funding streams for STEM than the previous law, said Brown of the STEM Education Coalition, even without the partnership grant. And those could also still receive funding through appropriations. The math and science partnerships had perhaps 100 guarantees every year. Now there will be literally thousands of districts spending federal funds on STEM education activities. And then the America Competes Act, this is from Catherine Kohler, professor of science education at Southern Connecticut State. The federal government has been a driving force behind STEM initiatives in the United States. STEM funding has been plentiful since 2007 when the Bush administration signed into law the America Creating Opportunities to Meaningfully Promote Excellence in Technology, Education, and Science Act. I would also like to run an attack on their inherency too that says Trump's current education budget plans to further devastate STEM education. We have evidence from Heartland.com, this is from November of 2017, that Donald Trump actually just dedicated $200 million to STEM research and education. So by them saying that the Trump administration his budget is going to be detrimental to education, it's not true, because he's already put forth effort to give money to the STEM education and research fund. So therefore, there's not a need to enact this plan to have this mandatory reallocation of funds to the STEM career, because it's going to happen. Donald Trump is going to spend money on STEM research and education, and he's going to do it in a way where he's not going to be taking money away from places where the money could be used better. All right, I'm now open for cross-examination.
Just to clarify, so you made an attack on our harms 3, harms 4, our inherency 2, our inherency 4, and our solvency 2, is that correct? Okay. Starting off with the harms 3 attack, you said that the U.S. has acts in place to bolster education?
Yeah, that we are paying enough attention to STEM education, and that was when I talked about the 2 plans that are already in place.
And then your evidence from your attack on our harms 4, that was pulled from 2012, correct? The quote was pulled
for the harms 4. Yeah, the quote was from 2012, and then the second part of it was something that he said in 2013.
Okay, so would you agree that a lot of things could change in the technology world in 4 to 5 years?
Yes, but the article that this was published in by this professor of world politics was from 2015, so that was only 2 years ago.
Okay, but still the quote was published from 2012. Other
If it
than
was
that.
published in 2015, it obviously means that it still holds weight in today's world if it was published by a professor.
Okay, and then your source for your inherency 2 was Heartland.com?
Yes.
Okay, what is Heartland.com?
It's a news site similar to like the Washington Post or.
Okay, and would you say that could have any bias?
Yes, but I believe that any source could potentially have bias.
Okay. And you're attacking our inherency 4, as you said we have too many STEM workers. That's correct?
Yes, about how there are already too many graduates in STEM fields and that they often go to work in other fields because of oversupply.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all.
Hi, I'm Mike Rowe. 14 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, this year she celebrated her 50th wedding anniversary.
Is that why you've taken off your jeans?
No, I've taken off my jeans to prove the link between jeans and the fight against breast cancer.
Oh, that's interesting. Do I have to take off my jeans?
No, nobody has to take off their jeans, Mom, but everybody has to go to denimday.com right now. I'll explain everything, dress code optional.
Apparently. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. Learn more at denimday.com.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
Negative team ready? Okay, Judge, to roadmap for you, I'm going to be refuting their attacks on our harms 1, or on our harms 3, our harms 4, our inherency 2, our inherency 4, as well as our solvency 2. Going right into their attack on our harms 3, they said that the U.S. currently has acts in place to bolster STEM education. Those acts were the ACA and the ESSA. I have evidence here saying that the Trump administration's new budget has actually slashed both of those programs. This evidence comes from Lauren Kammer, U.S. education reporter at U.S. News. When it comes to boosting science and technology and engineering and math, the news from Washington isn't good. While the Trump administration has shown some signs of prioritizing STEM, federal budget programs that support STEM initiatives are on the chopping block under President Trump's recent budget proposal for the fiscal year of 2018, which has been passed. That was the bottom line from panelists of the 2017 News STEM Solutions Conference titled A Look at the Future of Federal STEM Policy. The annual forum is taking place in San Diego from May 24 to May 26th. Among other things, the spending plan would eliminate an entirely $1.6 billion pool of money created under the new federal education law, Every Student Succeeds Act, which they referred to, which state and local schools can use for high-quality STEM courses, increase access to STEM for underserved populations, science fairs, and specialty STEM schools, after-school programs, among many other things. The ACA was also under the chopping block here. The president's budget proposal would also axe federal spending on teacher preparation by $2.4 billion, money that can be used by districts to recruit STEM educators and restructure pay scales for hard-to-fill jobs, which often include science and math. Moving on to their attack on our harms 4, they said that U.S. cyber capabilities are already the best in the world. We have evidence here from November 12, 2017, that the NSA was just hacked in the worst hack of the 21st century. Jake Williams awoke last April in Orlando, Florida, a hotel where he was leading a training session. Checking Twitter, Mr. Williams, a cybersecurity expert, was dismayed to discover that he had been thrust into the middle of one of the worst cybersecurity debacles to ever befall American intelligence. America's largest and most secretive intelligence agency had been deeply infiltrated. Mr. Williams had written on the company blog about the shadow brokers, a mysterious group that had somehow obtained the hacking tools of the United States and used others to spy on other countries. Now the group had replied an angry screed on Twitter and identified him correctly as a former member of the National Security Agency's hacking group, Tailored Access Operations, or TAO, a job he had not publicly disclosed. Then the shadow brokers astonished him by dropping technical details that made it clear that they knew about the highly classified hacking operations he had conducted. This shows that the United States' cyber capabilities may be ahead of the countries in the world, but there are far larger external factors in the world. So these cyber weapons that we're developing, they're not even able to keep up with the hackers that are stealing from the United States, which is apparent because in 2017, in November, the NSA had just been hacked. The NSA was supposed to be one of the most secure agencies in the world. And these things that they're using, these cyber weapons, are created at huge expense to American taxpayers, whose cyber weapons have now been picked up by hackers in North Korea and Russia and shot right back at the United States. So these cyber weapons that we're developing, these are actually being stolen from us and actually being used back against us. So the United States cyber capabilities may be on top of the world when it comes to other countries, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about external factors that are not countries, like these shadow brokers that hack the NSA. Moving on to the Inherency 2 attack. They used Heartland.com as their source. They admitted that the source could have bias. They said Donald Trump dedicated $200 million to STEM. As I just read, he actually just eliminated about $5 billion from STEM education. So we're dedicating $200 million from the $5 billion he just slashed. That shows that he's not actually friendly towards STEM education. Moving on to their attack on our Inherency 4. The negative team had said that we have too many STEM workers. I have evidence here from the U.S. Labor Department that 9 out of 10 of the fastest growing jobs in the world are STEM jobs. Also, according to onlinecollege.org, healthcare is the industry currently leading in needing the most of skilled workers, but 8 out of 10 of these top 10 most needed jobs are STEM jobs. That shows that obviously there may be a oversupply of these workers, but there's a demand for these workers as well in these specific fields. Moving on to their attack on our Solvency 2, they said there are too many STEM graduates, and they also said our plan is not needed. Our plan is needed because these current policies are not working, as we've proven in our harms. These harms are being caused because the current policies by the United States are not working. They're leading to the NSA being hacked. They're leading to these problems that we've already disclosed in our harms 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So this plan definitely is. This plan is needed because if we don't, first of all, our students aren't going to be able to fill these jobs that are being taken, although they're already being taken from abroad. And then our cybersecurity is going to keep falling and falling and falling, and we're going to have these attacks continue to happen until we actually put money into STEM funding. Because these students need to learn about this cybersecurity and things like that so then they can become the defense against these cyber attacks. Thank you. I'm now open for cross-examination.
So for your attack on our Harms 4, did you say that that was caused by a U.S. operative, like a former U.S. operative?
No, it was the U.S. operative was exposed, not by the hackers. He was a former hacker for the United States.
So he was a former hacker for the United States that went through the STEM education programs that were given to him through the United States education system. That's what you said, that the hacker was originally from the United States.
No, not the hacker. Okay, so.
Do you know where the hackers were located? Like
No, they haven't been. That's not been disclosed. They're called the shadow brokers. This Jake Williams character, he was a former cybersecurity expert for the United States. He wasn't a part of the hacker group. He was one that was reporting on the hack.
Okay, so these shadow hackers could potentially have been trained in STEM in the United States.
Potentially, but probably not likely. Probably not likely.
Why is that probably not likely? If our evidence says that the U.S. has the best STEM education in the world, did you provide any evidence that says otherwise?
No, I'm just saying, well, you said the U.S. has the best cybersecurity in the world, cybersecurity capabilities. So basically what we're showing here is that the United States cyber capabilities are not enough to keep up with the growing number of hackers.
It's also very likely that countries that wish us harm are behind us.
All right. Which countries would you say wish us harm?
North Korea, Russia,
Okay.
Iran.
Okay, so in your refutation of our attack on your Solvency II, I believe, you said that these jobs were moving abroad. Did you give a reason as to why they were moving abroad?
Because our students aren't well trained enough in these fields to be able to fill these jobs. Instead, they're being taken abroad.
So it has nothing to do with the fact that the wages are lower.
So the jobs that are being exported, these jobs that are being exported, they're like tech support and things like that. So like they're not super highly skilled jobs. What we're saying is that people are coming into the United States to do these jobs because we have a talent shortage within the United States. So the jobs that are being exported for lower wages are things like tech support and things like that that are not highly skilled jobs, which we're referring to.
Okay, and the evidence that you read about how Donald Trump supposedly slashed these programs, when was that from?
It's very recent. It was right prior before his budget was passed.
This new dad is picturing a tree house in the sky, but he's ignoring the instructions. Good luck, big guy. His kids know that he's building without a clue. Never been so good with nails and glue. Now we're trapped inside a box. I hope mom knows what to do. Mom! See, you don't have to be perfect to be the perfect parent.
Thousands of siblings in foster care will take you just as you are.
Connor is struggling in school.
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
Why don't you understand me?
I do. This is what it feels like for kids with learning and attention issues. Redirecting to understood.org.
All right, judge ready? Judges. Timekeeper, are you ready? And affirmative team, are you ready? All right, judges, just a roadmap for you. I'm going to be making a topicality on the word substantially, making 2 disads, one on regulatory trade-off and one on a defense budget trade-off. And if I have time, I will go over the attacks on the Harms 3, Harms 4, Inherency 2, Inherency 4, and Solvency 2. I'm going to start off with that topicality. The plan violates the term substantially. This is because substantially means by at least a factor of 50%. The affirmative team does not know by how much their plan is increasing their funding for STEM education as an admission during cross-ex. They did not specify how much of that money would be new money and how much of that money would just be money from the liquidated programs that they mentioned in their plan. They said that the ACA and ESSA were on the chopping block, and I have some evidence that goes against that right here and still attacks their funding that I'll get to later, but for now I am going to start off with that regulatory trade-off disadvantage. The thesis of this disadvantage is that new regulations on education will force a trade-off with other regulations promulgated by the Department of Education. In January, President Trump enacted an executive order that requires any new regulation by an agency to require that two regulations from that agency be cut. Specifically, Trump is looking to cut the gainful employment rule implemented by Obama that regulates for-profit colleges. The rule seeks to crack down on financial aid that goes to support for-profit colleges that cannot prove that their schools lead to gainful employment of their students. This rule is crucial to curb abuses by such schools and to protect the economy from a meltdown caused by student debt that could rival the subprime mortgage crisis. Reversing the rule would cost taxpayers billions of dollars in unnecessary taxpayer financial aid for worthless for-profit institutions. The uniqueness is that Trump will look to roll back the gainful employment rule. This is from Lucas Weaver from Biola University, March 2nd, 2017. Now that the Trump administration has taken over, it is looking to roll back rules and regulations placed on both for-profit and non-profit institutions by the Obama administration, which makes sense since President Trump owned his own for-profit school, which collapsed under a scandal. While some of these regulations would be beneficial to colleges and universities, the repeal of the gainful employment rule would allow for for-profit schools to continue their deceitful ways. The link is that the affirmative plan leads to a trade-off with useful Department of Education regulations. Obviously, if you put this regulation into place, that executive order will take hold and will require that two regulations be cut from that. This is from Wayne Cruz, Competitive Enterprise Institute, reviewing Trump's first 100 days, April 27th, 2017. Wayne Cruz on Trump's regulatory reform efforts. When it comes to confronting excessive federal regulation, the Trump administration has so far delivered on promises. White House efforts have focused on regulating bureaucrats rather than the private sector issuing rules to limit their rules. During the campaign, Trump promised a regulatory freeze and to use 2 rules out of every 1 rule in regulatory framework. Right after inauguration, both were done. Plus, he added a directive that new regulatory costs imposed by agencies should not exceed 0, so the costs have to be fully offset. To date, President Trump has also signed 13 resolutions disapproving and rescinding last-minute Obama regulations. This means that federal regulations has largely stopped in 2017 by greater than 70% Trump originally promised, at least for the time being. The impact is that the gainful employment rules are the best safeguard against abuse for for-profit colleges. This is from Michael Itzkowitz. With over $150 billion in federal aid going to institutions each year, it is extremely important that institutions do a good job graduating its students and ensuring that they are well-trained and prepared to succeed in today's workforce. The gainful employment rules may not be perfect, but they are the best safeguard in the current system to ensure students and taxpayers aren't paying for programs that provide little or no value. So that whole disad just basically says that if this STEM education goes into place, then they're going to have to cut 2 regulations that already exist on these for-profit colleges and will lead to that. It will lead to those colleges just abusing their power for that for-profit and becoming these just commercialized corporations that have these biases towards corporations where they can employ their students. As for the next disad, this is a defense budget trade-off disad. The thesis of this disadvantage is that the affirmative plan's funding trades off with the national defense budget and leaves the U.S. vulnerable to attack. The link is that the Plank 4 of the affirmative plan calls for $8 billion of the defense budget to be reallocated to STEM education. The uniqueness is that currently the defense budget allows for the protection of the U.S. from multiple threats, including cyber attacks, as per evidence that my partner read previously. The brink is that once the budget is taken from the military, other countries will recognize the effects such as the inability to fund research into missile interception from North Korea. The impact is that the weakened defense budget draws the attention of North Korea, who will act on previous threats made towards the U.S., and that lack of funding for those missile interceptors would essentially mean that currently there's a 40% hit-miss ratio, and 40% of the time we are intercepting missiles or in these tests that we're doing, and that research needs to be funded in order to eliminate that risk. And if the affirmative plan is saying that these cyber attacks have already happened and all of this national security information has been breached, and that all of those organizations and all of those countries that want to do us harm have that information, then that just proves that now is not the time to be cutting our defense budget. It is the time to be bolstering our defense budget and bolstering our research into these missile interceptors and all sorts of protection that could prevent these kinds of wars with North Korea and Russia. I believe that covers the topicality and the 2 disads. I'm going to go back and read some Harms 3 evidence that states that the America Competes Act promotes STEM spending. The federal government has been a driving force behind the STEM initiatives in the United States. STEM funding has been plentiful since 2007 when the Bush administration signed into law the America Creating Opportunities and Meaningfully Promote Excellence in Technology, Education, and Science Act, known as the America Competes Act. The emphasis of this law was to invest in innovation through research and development and to improve the competitiveness of the United States, and an authorized $32.7 billion between 2008 and 2010 for programs and activities in STEM-related disciplines. So what that's saying is that these kinds of organizations are already in play, and they said that the ACA and ESSA were under the chopping block currently in the Trump administration, but we then provided evidence that said that he was going to reallocate $200 million towards STEM education that wouldn't affect the national defense budget, that wouldn't require the liquidation of these already on the chopping block organizations. And we already have these organizations that donate $32.7 billion between 2008 and 2010 for like about 16.3 billion each year. So that obviously means that their harm is invalid and that should be brought to the negative team. Thank you, Judge. I'm now available for cross-examination.
Okay, so for that second disad that you said,
The defense budget trade-off disad? So if you're going to take $8 billion from the defense budget and reallocate it to STEM education, then that's obviously going to have some kind of hindrance on the defense budget, which is being used right now to go towards these programs that are meant to protect us from actual like warfare with North Korea and Russia.
It's not really. Okay. Would you say that $8 billion of $600 billion budget, is that like going to really cripple the United States defense?
Obviously, it's being used in some way, shape, or form, and that is going to have it's going to impede the research that's made in the,
Would you say that it would cripple and lead to this $8 billion of $600 billion?
It would slow us down and would make us more vulnerable, yes.
Okay. And then the regulatory, you were just basically saying that we have to cut 2 bills in order to.
Right, and specifically that one that regulates for-profit institutions.
Okay.
Yeah, so with the regulatory trade-off disad, what that's saying is since Donald Trump already dislikes this this law that's in place that is banning these for-profit institutions, if you introduce this plan, it will give him enough cause and it will give him the ability to cut this for-profit college.
Thank you. So you guys are saying that Trump is donating $200 million to STEM education, right?
Yeah, and that was from...
But do you guys acknowledge that he did slash this funding in his budget proposal, as we have evidence of?
Our evidence stated that he donated $200 million to STEM, which was also from November 2017.
Yeah, but but you guys are you guys admitting that he did cut ACA and ESSA, as we had said in our evidence? Are you guys?
But there are also other organizations that provide a lot more money than the ESSA and ACA.
Okay, thank you. You said the ACA provided $32 billion, is that correct?
Yeah.
Not the ACA.
What provided the $32 billion?
The Competes Act.
America Competes Act, yeah.
Right.
The ACA.
That's the ACA.
Yeah. Okay. So that provided the $32 billion.
Right.
And
yeah.
You're acknowledging that it has been slashed.
No, we were not acknowledging that it has been slashed.
It was on the budget proposal that was approved.
Okay. Well, we read evidence as well that said that he just donated $200 million to STEM.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Everywhere that we go, he makes people laugh and makes people smile, and I feel like I have that quality.
He's the one who always takes me fishing.
I watch golf with him. And
I watch him cook because when I grow up, I want to be a cook too.
We have the same faces like this.
Dad is the one, when you fall, that picks you up.
That unconditional sense of presence and reassurance is really what makes him my father.
May I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Judges, are you ready? Timekeeper, are you ready? Affirmative team, are you ready? All right, so the roadmap for the judges, I'm going to be hitting on the the defense budget trade-off dissad, the regulatory trade-off dissad, and the topicality on substantial, and as well as the attacks on harms 3, harms 4, inherency 2, inherency 4, and solvency 2. To start off with the topicality, the plan violates the term substantially. This is because substantially means at least 50% by our definition. The affirmative plan does not know by how much their plan is going to, by what percentage their plan is increasing funding, because they were unable to say how much funding is currently being allocated to STEM education and research at the moment. Our definition is superior because of bright line and grammatical context, and topicality is, of course, a voting issue. Moving on to the national defense budget trade-off dissad. The thesis of this dissad was that the affirmative plan's funding trades off with the national defense budget and leaves the U.S. vulnerable to attack. What my partner was saying with this dissad is that the affirmative team's plan is very concerned with cybersecurity, but by them taking away money from the defense fund, they're ultimately leaving the U.S. at more of a risk than they were already concerned about with the cybersecurity flaw. And I did read evidence that said that cybersecurity capabilities are already the best in the world. And as my partner said before, things like the missile intervention with North Korea, there's a 40% effectiveness rate right now. So we could be putting that $8 billion towards something like that to protect from an imminent threat, rather than this hypothetical U.S. cyber attack, when we had read evidence that the U.S. cyber capabilities are already very well off. Moving on to the regulatory trade-off dissad. The link for this dissad was that the affirmative plan leads to a trade-off with useful Department of Education regulations. And then the uniqueness was that Trump will look to roll back the gainful employment rule, which is what was this safeguard against abuse for these for-profit colleges. So what this is saying is that if the affirmative plan is put into place, Trump is going to take this opportunity to slash this gainful employment rule. And that's going to allow for these for-profit colleges to abuse and undermine the economy, and it risks another crisis like the subprime mortgage crisis. And then our weight was that economic downturn threatens human survival. So what we're saying is that these for-profit colleges, the safeguard that is in place to protect Americans from being taken advantage of by these colleges will be rolled back if the affirmative plan is enacted, because Donald Trump is already looking to get rid of this rule that is banning these for-profit colleges. And when these for-profit colleges do start to take advantage of and undermine the economy, it's going to lead to economic downturn. And that evidence was from May 9, 2017. It was important that we avoid all these policy errors, not for just the sake of our prosperity, but for the sake of our survival. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to our attacks on their harms 3 and harms 4. For the harms 3, they said that inadequate attention to STEM education is significantly harmful. We provided evidence that said that there are already 2 acts in place that are currently funding STEM education, and it's giving them more than enough funds and resources to be effective. In their harms 4, it said that cyber attacks are increasingly likely and devastating. New defenses are key to preventing conflicts.
The same
coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Sometimes all it takes to be a dad is remembering how to be a kid again. Take time to be a dad today.
Judge ready? Judges ready? I'm sorry. Timekeeper ready? Negative team ready, I'm sorry. All right, roadmap for you, Judge. I will be going over the harms and inherencies that were attacked. I will be going over the disads that we faced and the topicality. Okay, so first of all, just to start out with the regulatory trade-off disad. I'm sorry, for the information for our regulatory trade-off disad, the benefit cost analysis demonstrates that the regulation is anticipated to improve national security at a primary benefit. This is from whitehouse.gov. This shows, this is for the regulatory trade-off. If it's a matter of national security, it's exempted. That's what this bill is saying, that's included inside of the bill. And I'd say that these hacking and these missiles are a matter of national security. So that disad is out of the question because this is a matter of national security, so this does have an exemption. For the defense budget trade-off disad, they were talking about money and funding for that, the $8 billion that we were talking about. You can throw all the money you want into this, but it's the STEM skills that increase the likelihood of this successful missile interception. It's not the money that's the issue here. If you could put all the money into it that you want, but it's these STEM skills that we need to teach people and teach these children and teach these employees how to master those skills adequately so that they can defend the country with those skills. I have evidence for that somewhere. Here it is. Evidence for that from William Swanson, who was the chairman of Raytheon Company in 2014. This is the largest producer of guided missiles in the world, of guided missiles. So if it's talking about guided missiles, I'm pretty sure this has a little bit of relevance. They contract with the Department of Defense, so that's showing how they're involved in this. And he said that the demand for many jobs requiring STEM skills is outstripping the supply, and the problem will only get worse. So this is showing that in that missile realm, that this is an important issue, and they believe that STEM skills are required. On to this for the harms 3. They said that we give a lot out already, but also admitted that $34.4 billion from the ACA has been cut. This proves that Trump is against them. For the harms 4, if cyber capabilities are so good, then why have we been hacked by this secretive group called the shadow brokers? That's completely surpassed all of our biggest defenses in our cyber areas. This demonstrates that we need new defenses that aren't provided currently by the U.S. defense budget. For the inherency 2, it says Trump gives $200 million, but slashed nearly $35 billion in funds. This shows that doesn't support, and I have evidence against that. So here it is. According to Niskan Alpan, staff for PBS NewsHour, Trump's budget cuts drastically in science and health programs, March 16, 2017. While a 1% cut represents the smallest slash among the field of science agencies, NASA would shutter its $115 million Office of Education, so long as the Space Camp and a long list of other classroom projects geared toward engaging students in science, technology, engineering, and math. So that shows that the inherency, that should be pulled to our side. The inherency 4 was dropped as well as the solvency 2, so the inherency 4 and solvency 2 should be pulled to the affirmative side. And lastly, for the topicality, they said that they ran unsubstantially, and our plan cuts the funding to $0, then adds $12.3 billion to the budget. So that shows that we are indeed aware of how much money is going into that, and we showed how that's substantial. With that going down to 0 and then increasing up to $12.3 billion in budget. But yeah, I would like to say that. In the case of if a missile is fired at the U.S., these STEM jobs are what would save us, what would help us. Because if we would avoid that, or we would use the money, can I finish my sentence? Or we would just focus on putting money into that and not skill, there's a good possibility that we could be very vulnerable to an attack. Thank you. Please vote.
Go first.
Gopher cakes are for everyone. Just one stack is what it takes. And it's Gopher, Gopher, Gopher cakes. Open wide, stuff your face. There's always room for more Gopher cakes. Empty the box, then reload. Eat those Gopher cakes till you explode.
Exercised lately?
Till you explode.
Don't let E. coli mosh with your food. An estimated 3,000 Americans die from a foodborne illness each year. So always separate raw meat from vegetables. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Just a roadmap for you, judges. I'm going to be hitting on all of our arguments against our case, starting off with the two disads, going to the topicality, and then to the stock issues. Starting off with the defense budget trade-off disad. Obviously, if you're trading off with the national defense budget and going into STEM education fields, there isn't necessarily going to be a push to just repay that kind of STEM engineering into the national defense. It just means that there are going to be jobs that revolve around STEM education that are being filled unnecessarily based on our evidence by all these other students. It doesn't mean that those students are going to go into and just help out the defense system of America. That budget could be used to just accelerate these kinds of research facilities and these research programs that are already going and researching how to intercept intercontinental ballistic missiles and all of those kinds of things. They cited that these kinds of things would be helped by the reallocation of funds to the STEM engineering and STEM education, but just because you are educated in how to code a computer does not necessarily mean that you know how to intercept a ballistic missile. It doesn't mean that you are going to have a passion to go into the military and help out the military. So that refutation should be pulled to the negative team. As for the regulatory trade-off disadvantage, they cited national security and the fact that having STEM education would help our national security, but the impact of that regulatory trade-off disadvantage doesn't have anything to do with national security. The impact is that gainful employment rules are the best safeguard against abuse for-profit colleges, and it would abuse the American public, which wouldn't cause any kind of national security. It would cause a crisis here at home within the U.S. It isn't anything to do with other countries being a threat to us or decreasing our economy and leading to another country attacking us. It just has to do with us at home. So that national security refutation, I'm not really sure where that came from, but that should be pulled to the negative side. As for the topicality on substantially, I don't believe they hit on this, but they said that they were taking it down to $0 and then re-increasing it to $12.3 billion. So that still doesn't provide an exact number by how much they are increasing right now. It doesn't mean that they are increasing by $12.3 if they're going to be taking away and then giving back. They don't have an exact number and they don't have an exact percentage by what they are increasing. In fact, they said that they would decrease first and then increase. So by that, I think that topicality should be pulled to the affirmative team. And when they say that these programs are on the chopping block for the budget, and then say that they should be liquidated and put into the funding, that doesn't make sense, because if they're on the chopping block for the federal income that they are receiving, then that means that the federal government isn't going to want to fund those. So they would essentially have to find all of their funding from a different source, which they don't provide, and they could not use those as a way of funding that program. That would mean that more of their budget would have to be cut from the military, leading to that disad that I brought up previously and making that even more harmful. As for the harms 3, harms 4, inherency 2, inherency 4 arguments, I believe that our evidence from 2016, 2017 adequately deals with those arguments, whereas their evidence was slightly outdated. As for the solvency 2, I have evidence here from Gerald Tirozzi. Could I finish my sentence? That says, jobs are going overseas not because U.S. workers are poorly trained, but because foreign labor is cheaper. Thank you, judges. Please vote negative.
things you've done with your bike, donating it to Goodwill may be the most incredible of all. Your donations help fund job placement and training for people in your community, which means your stuff can be more powerful than you think. Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Judges ready? Timekeeper ready? Negative team ready? Okay, judges, to roadmap for you, I'm going to be refuting all the attacks that they made against our plan, as well as refuting the disadvantages and the topicality. First, I'd like to start out with their harms 3. The refutation of our stock issue attacks against theirs were that our evidence was outdated, but that's actually just not true. Our evidence is almost always from later than 2016. We actually have some evidence within a month from now. Evidence about the hack on the NSA is actually from November 12th, 2017. That's within a month. So our evidence is not outdated. It's all within at least 2 years of when it was published. So for them to call our evidence outdated, I'm not understanding what their refutation actually was. The attack on our harms 4, they didn't actually make a real refutation in their last rebuttal. Basically, they kind of just dropped it and put it under the point that we had outdated evidence. But anyway, either way, I'm going to be talking about it again. They said that U.S. cyber capabilities are already the best, but that hack on the NSA just gives us a small glimpse into what is actually out there. That the severe technology that they're able to use against the United States to hack the NSA, that shows that that's not even the full picture of what's out there. That we're not talking about North Korea and Russia. We're talking about hackers that we don't even know where they're based out of. These hackers are coming in and they're destroying U.S. infrastructure. They're hacking the NSA. The NSA is supposed to be super secure, and they just hacked it. Moving on to the attack on our heresy 2, they said that Donald Trump gives money to STEM, but he clearly opposes STEM as he slashed nearly $35 billion from it and only added in $200 million. That is not significant for them. Him to add $200 million, that's not even anything compared to $35 billion that he's already slashed. For them to say that Donald Trump is not against STEM is just facetious. The disadvantages, the regulatory disadvantage, what we were talking about with the regulatory disadvantage is that our plan is actually exempted from that, from the bill that's passed. Our plan does not need to follow, our plan does not need to repeal those because it is a matter of national security, which is actually in the bill that says if it's a matter of national security, you do not need to pass these bills, you do not need to repeal these bills. So that makes their disadvantage moot because our plan does not actually need to be passed through and get rid of these 2 bills that we don't even need to get rid of them because our plan is a matter of national security. Moving on to the defense trade-off disadvantage, $8 billion of a $600 billion budget is a drop in the bucket of defense funding, but we've shown with our evidence that it will help with STEM. It's shown that it can have a great impact on the United States students' learning. So $8 billion of the $600 billion in the defense budget is not going to cripple the economy. Actually, it's going to help. It's going to help with the economy. It's going to help with our cybersecurity. And I just don't understand how $8 billion out of $600 billion would even come close to doing anything that the negative team has said. Moving on to the topicality, they ran a topicality saying that their definition was over 50%. They ran a topicality on the word substantially. Our plan calls to liquidate $4.3 billion down to 0. Then we're changing that to $12.3 billion. 0 to $12.3 billion is over 50%, and $4.3 billion to $12.3 billion is over 50%. So both of those show that our plan is topical. Topicality is a voting issue because it creates competitive equity. Also, they referred to the ACA and ESSA as some of these plans that we're cutting. These plans have actually already been these things have actually already been cut, and they're not in the 81 programs that we're going to be liquidating. So them saying that we're going to be cutting all this money and stuff from these programs. These programs have actually already been cut by the Trump budget. So for them to keep referring back to them is just not true. Also, the attacks on our Inherency 4 and our Solvency 2 were both dropped in the first rebuttal. So to bring that up again would be you're not allowed to bring up new points in your rebuttals. So those were both dropped. And please vote affirmative.
When I was in foster care, I
I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
The odds of this boy achieving his dream in fashion? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
All right, and for our finals for varsity, we had Hudson, David, and Carson debate against Blissfield's Allison and Max. And the winners of our debate were Team Blissfield, Allison and Max. So come on up. That's right. There you go. Turn around there. Let's get a nice little photo. There we go. Congratulations. And our runners up, come on up. Go. Congratulations.